Have you ever just stopped and looked at a massive tree and wondered, how is that thing built? I mean, really built. It's so much more than just wood and leaves. Inside every plant, there's this hidden world of incredible biological engineering. So today, we're going to go under the microscope and uncover the secret world of plant tissues. These are the specialized materials that make a plant, well, a plant.
All right, let's kick things off with a question that sounds, well, almost silly. Why don't plants move? Seems obvious, right? But the answer to that simple question is the key to unlocking everything about how they're put together. Their entire lifestyle is built around being stuck in one spot, and that requires a completely different engineering playbook than you'd find in, say, an animal.
And this right here, this lays it all out perfectly. You know, animals were mobile, so most of our tissues are alive, constantly burning energy to move around. But plants, they're fixed. They prioritize strength and support above all else. And get this, it means that many of their most important structural tissues are actually made of dead cells. That one little difference in lifestyle pretty much dictates their entire internal design.
So, when we talk about this internal design, what we're really talking about are tissues. And it's just like in our own bodies. A tissue is simply a group of cells that have teamed up to do one specific job. You can think of them as a plant's specialized building materials, everything from the foundation to the plumbing to the outer walls.
Okay, so where do all these specialized building materials actually come from? Well, unlike animals, which kind of grow all over, plants have these dedicated construction zones. They're like little growth engines packed with cells that are basically forever young.
And these zones, they have a name. We call them meristems. They're these concentrated pockets of what's called meristematic tissue. You can see them right here, at the very tips of the shoots and the roots, and also running along the sides of the stem. Seriously, just think of these spots as the plant's 24/7 construction sites, where all the brand new cells are born.
Now, these meristems aren't all the same. They're specialists. First, you've got the apical meristem, right at the very tips. Its whole job is growing taller, pushing that shoot up towards the sun and the roots deeper down into the soil. Then, running along the sides, you have the lateral meristem. Its job? To make the plant wider, to increase its girth and make it stronger. And finally, there's the intercalary meristem, which helps leaves and branches grow out from their base.
Okay, so you've got these meristems, and they're just constantly churning out all these new generic cells. But then what? A plant can't just be a big blob of growth cells, right? These new cells, they need to find a job. They need to become specialists. And that whole process is called differentiation. It's basically a one-way street for a cell. So first, a meristem cell divides. Then that new cell starts to mature, and pretty quickly it loses its ability to divide ever again. And finally, it settles into its permanent role, changing its shape and size to become a dedicated worker cell. That's when it officially becomes part of what we call a permanent tissue.
So what kind of things do these new specialist cells build? Well, they form all the permanent tissues, the actual, building blocks of the plant. It's kind of like having a construction kit with all these different materials, each one designed for a specific job: support, storage, flexibility, you name it. The most common simple tissues, the real workhorses, fall into three main groups. You've got parenchyma, which is kind of the filler, then collenchyma for flexible support, and finally sclerenchyma for that hardcore, rigid strength. Let's take a quick look at what makes each one so special. First up is parenchyma. This stuff is the most common tissue in a plant, by far. Its cells have pretty thin walls and they're alive. Their main jobs are to fill up space and act as the plant's pantry, storing food, storing water. Think of it like the packing peanuts or maybe the drywall of the plant world. It's just everywhere. Next, we have collenchyma. These are also living cells, but check this out. Their walls are unevenly thickened, especially in the corners. And that unique structure gives the plant flexible support. It's the reason a young stem or a leaf stalk can bend and sway in the wind without just snapping in half. It's strong, but it's not brittle. And then, for the real heavy-duty strength, the plant brings out the sclerenchyma. These cells have incredibly thick, rigid walls that are reinforced with something called lignin. It's a natural polymer that acts kind of like a hardening agent. And here's the kicker. These cells are actually dead when they're mature. Their only job is to provide pure, raw, mechanical strength. This stuff is literally the plant's concrete. And hey, if you want a perfect real-world example of this stuff, just think about a coconut. You know that tough, fibrous husk that is just impossible to break through? Yep, that is made almost entirely of sclerenchyma tissue. It's nature's armor plating, giving maximum protection to that seed on the inside.
All right, so we've got the internal structure down. But every building needs an outer wall, right? A plant needs a skin. It needs a protective outer layer to defend itself from losing water, from pests, from, well, everything. This is its first line of defense.
In young plants and in leaves, this skin is called the epidermis. It's usually just a single layer of cells that creates this protective barrier. But here's the cool part. It's not a solid wall. It's dotted with these millions of tiny adjustable pores called stomata. And they act like little mouths, opening and closing to let the plant breathe, taking in the carbon dioxide it needs and releasing oxygen.
But what happens when a plant gets older and bigger and woodier? That thin little epidermis just isn't going to cut it anymore. So it gets replaced by a much tougher layer that we all know as bark. This stuff is formed from layers and layers of dead cork cells, which are waterproofed with a waxy substance called suberin. This creates a thick, durable shield that protects the tree from the outside world.
And when you put it all together, when you look at a cross-section of a stem like this, you can really see how it all works together as one beautiful, elegant system. From that protective outer skin to all the filler and support tissues deep inside, everything is organized perfectly to keep that plant alive and thriving.
So let's just boil all this down. What are the big things to remember? First, a plant's entire structure is dictated by the fact that it stays in one place. Second, those meristems, they're the forever young growth engines. Third, the permanent tissues, your parenchyma, collenchyma, and sclerenchyma. They're like a toolkit of specialized building materials. And finally, and this is the big one, in plants, structure is always perfectly designed for function.
It's really a masterclass in biological engineering, isn't it? Perfected over hundreds of millions of years. Which kind of leaves us with one last thought. If plants have managed to create such strong, flexible, and efficient materials using nothing more than sunlight, water, and air, what can we, as human engineers and designers, learn from their blueprint?